Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to learn how to make a transparent corset with yoke, kind of an inbuilt corset where you have your foundation to place your applique. If that's what you want to learn how to make, then keep watching this video to the very end. Firstly, we are starting off. I'm going to be showing you some details about the basic bodice front. That very line is the shoulder line. That's my shoulder slope, which I came down by 1.5 inches. The midpoint of my shoulder. This line equals also the length of my shoulder, and that is the length of my armhole. All right, like I said, that very line is the chest line, but it's the same length with the length of my shoulder. Now from the midpoint of my shoulder, I'm coming down by 10 inches, which is my bust, shoulder to bust point, 13 inches shoulder to underbust, 16 inches shoulder to waistline. I'll go ahead to use my ruler to square a line across this, kind of to mark them out. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do want to subscribe. Click the bell notification icon so you'll be the very first person to know when I post lovely pattern drafting and sewing tutorials like this. Thank you. So I'll go ahead to square out a line also at the waistline, and now I can see all the lines very visible: bust point, under bust, and waistline. Now at my bust point, I'll go ahead to mark 3 inches, which is my bust apart measurement, or nipple to nipple like some of us call it. So I'll mark the nipple to nipple measurement on the bust line, under bust, and of course the waistline. I'll go ahead now to use my ruler to join all those dotted lines together right now. Then on my waistline, I'm going to be marking half inch apart from that nipple to nipple measurement, and I'm going to be connecting each of the half inch to the bust point like so. And having done that, now we'll go over to impute my round bust measurement. Okay, I'll also go ahead to impute my round waist measurement. So we'll go ahead to use our ruler to connect these points together right now. So having done that, now I'm going to be coming down from my chest line by 3 inches, and from there I'll go ahead to mark in my darts. All right, 3 inches. From there you mark in 4 inches, which is 1 inch for your side bust dart. I'll go ahead to connect those 1 inch mark to the bust points to actually form the side bust dart. So now our basic bodice front is almost completed. I'm going to be imputing the depth of my neckline, which is by 3 inches. This is for a basic neckline. Whatever I'm doing, I start off with my basic bodice. So whatever you're seeing is in the basic. Now for the armhole, I'm going to be getting the midpoint of the armhole, and I go ahead to come in by 1 inch and then go up by 1 inch like a guide for the curve, for the armhole curve. And I went ahead to curve it out. So I'm going ahead now to cut out the excesses so we can work with just the center front. So we can work with just the basic front bodice block. So at this point, we're almost done cutting it out. So now this is what it looks like by the time we're done. I'm going ahead now to mark the midpoint of my shoulder, and from there I'm connecting that point to the bust points. This is actually not necessary because we're making this corset with yoke, but if you're making it without a yoke, then this line is necessary. But nevertheless, I've marked it, so let's just move on. You're going up now 3 inches, which is going to be forming your neckline for the corset. I felt 3 inches is going to be so down and revealing. I decided to add half an inch to it, despite the fact that I'll be adding a yoke. But then I decided to go with 3 inches since I'll be adding a yoke. Okay, and of course appliques will be covering up the part of it that will be revealing. So I went in with the 3 inches, and I'm going to square it out. This is going to serve as your chest line, okay, or your neckline for the corset. Now on this very line at the center front, you want to mark half an inch. The bust point line at the center front, you want to mark half an inch on both sides. Then you go ahead to connect the half an inch to the bust point like so. So having done that, now this is what our pattern is looking like. At the underbust, you want to contour slightly by 1/2 inch on both sides of the underbust. You go ahead now to connect it with a straight line to the waistline. And with your curved rule, or if you do not have a curved rule, make sure you're using a curved line to connect this from the bust point to the underbust. So having done that, now this is what our pattern looks like. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is close up the side bust dart. You want to be very careful while doing this. So I'm going to close it and I'll tape it down. So the next thing we are going to do also is to close that very dart that is at the center front at the bust apart measurement. But it was kind of difficult and my paper wanted to rip. So I had to open this up from the bust apart line so it can relax the tension at the bust point. Having done that, I went ahead to close this up and I taped it down. So from here you want to come in by 1/2 inch. Some people come in by 1 inch, but here I came in by 1/2 inch. All right, then we are going to go up by 1 inch, by 1/2 inch, sorry. At some point I felt like the 1/2 inch that I went up, which is actually going to be where my corset, how deep my corset is going to be at the center front, I felt it was so down I had to increase it to 1 inch, meaning I went up by 1 inch from my bust line at the center front. Okay, I went up by 1 inch from my bust line at the center front. You see that later. So you want to curve this from that 1/2 inch to your under bust line like so. Now a guide to make sure you're having a rounded curve is to measure like this 3 inches, which is actually your bust circumference or bust arc measurement, or the distance between your bust point to your under bust. Okay, so you want to use it as a guide to make sure you have a rounded circle or a rounded curve, and then you connect it back to this point like so. So like I said, this point I felt it was so deep, I had to increase it by 1/2 inch, making it 1 inch. So I went up by 1 inch from that center front dart at the bust point line. Okay, I went up by 1 inch. So this is what we are having right now. The next thing we are going to do at the side seam, at the armhole line, okay, we're going to be coming down by 1/2 inch. And I'm going to come down by 1/2 inch. We are coming inwards by 2 inches. We're coming inwards by 2 inches, okay, and I kind of connected it. So from that 2 inches point, you also want to mark a curved line to the underbust. Also, I'm marking in 3 inches to be a guide for the circular curved line that I want to mark. So I'm going to be connecting it like so. You want to use, if you have a curved rule, you want to use it for this, but if you don't have, you can do what you see me doing now. So at this point, this is what we have. Next thing we are going to do is to connect this whole point back to the center front so we can form the corset proper. Can you see that? Now, because it's a 3-part corset, we are going to be coming down by 1.5 inches from this point all the way around like so. We are coming down from 1.5 inches to give it that beautiful seam design. And we'll go ahead to connect those dotted points together. Okay, So having done that, now this is what it looks like. So from the neckline of my yoke, I want to have a canoe neckline. So I'm going in by 1.5 inches from my armhole, and I'm going to be curving it to still maintain the 3 inches basic depth to form a canoe neckline for the yoke. And I'll go ahead with my scissors to cut this out now. And of course, we'll start cutting out our corset. So at this point, you have to really be careful on where you're putting your yoke, where you're starting your yoke. I felt like where I started my yoke is not really necessary. I should have started it from that 1 inch I went up. So you want to be very careful on where you're going to be starting or where your yoke will start from, especially where you're going to be attaching it to the corset. So I'm going to be setting this side aside now so we can cut out all the darts on the corset proper. So at this point, this is all that is. This is all the patterns that we need to create that very front corset that you saw at the beginning of the video. All right. Like I said, you do not want to discard your pattern until you're done sewing, because at some point you might feel like you're getting confused. You have to go back to your pattern. So here I'm using an organza fabric. It's actually it's a kind of fabric that is not easy to work with. So you have to be very careful. Always make sure you pin down your pattern before cutting it out. Organza fabric is not really easy to work with. If you can get an organdy, better. If you can get an organdy, better, okay? So I'm using an organza for this. So I'm going to have to cut one side and also go ahead to cut every piece of it. I'm taking you guys through the process of cutting every piece of it so you can actually see what it looks like, especially while cutting it on the fabric, so I can bring your imaginations to life if there is something like that. Okay, that's why I'm taking you through the process of cutting the fabric. Just in case you're working with your fabric and you notice some things, you can go back to this video and check. Now, one thing else I want to make note, I want you to take note of is, be sure you iron your fabric down before cutting your papers on it. It's going to help you a lot. It's going to help you avoid unnecessary inches that are going to be added to the fabric, because if it's rumpled and you're cutting it out rumpled, you probably might be adding some inches to the pattern that you don't know. Okay, so make sure you iron it out before you start cutting. All right, so we're done cutting now. The next thing we are going to do is to stitch. I'm going to be stitching this up. Okay, I'm going to stitch them up, and we'll be using I kind of cut a bias from the fabric we're using for the cup to do this. I'm going to do that, and this is what they look like. The next thing we are going to do is to sew up the cup. I'm going to sew up the cup, you guys. So we're going to be attaching it to where it's supposed to be. I made 4 cups. I'm going to be turning it, right? We're going to be closing it up. And as you can see, I didn't add any hats, whatever. I just used a soft paper stay or soft hair stay to iron. I'm going to have to sew it up, and also one side of the yoke. So I'll just take you guys through the process of sewing up this yoke now. I have a lot of tutorials where I've explained how to sew up a yoke. All right, so I'm going to be sewing it up. Of course, you want to start from the center first, sew one side, then come back to the center and complete the other side of the yoke. All right, and that is what I'm showing you guys now. For the application, you can just play around with it, use your chalk to draw it out, and at the end, this is what we have. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.